I see the red button, so we can get started. Well, welcome to the webinar today. We're going to discuss some issues related to our extension publication that's Weed and Brush Control Suggestions for Rangelands, and kind of familiarize you with that publication and some related topics to it. So, this publication, a lot of times we refer to it as 1466. That's the number of the publication, and it's a suggestion guide. And this is what the front cover of the publication looks like. It's available as a hard copy and also as electronically. And one of the really nice things about the electronic version is it's searchable. And you can download it for free, and we'll show you where you can go to do that when we get a few slides down the road here. So this publication is plant specific. It doesn't cover all the plants in the state, and it offers herbicide application options for controlling these specific plants that are in the publication. So the official title of it or number is RM 1466 or ERM, which is the electronic version. And so this this publication has recommendations or suggestions that are within the label for herbicides. Includes control ratings, which is very useful. We'll show you how that works in a little bit here. It's updated annually or as needed when we have some new information that we need to put in there. The recommendations or suggestions are supported by data. They're limited to selected species that we have data for, and it's required for any printed recommendations that are made. And the USDA NRCS has chosen to use it as a technical guide for cost share programs that they're involved with. And it is available at the agrilifebookstore.org. And this next slide here shows you opening the opening page on the AgriLife bookstore. And you can go into the AgriLife bookstore. You'll have to establish an account, establish a username and a password, and then anything that's electronic in there, you can download for free. There are some publications that are that you have to pay for because they're hard copies, or they're for sale publications. But the 1466 is available in an electronic version, so you can go in here, set up your account, and you can download that to your computer. If you have an iPad, you can put it on the iPad, and it's really convenient on an iPad in terms of searching and so forth. So where do these suggestions come from? Well, they come from data that's accumulated over space and time. We have replications over space and replication from year to year that support the data that we put in, that supports these suggestions. And it's submitted by sometimes by chemical companies, but also by specialists within our unit that have worked on specific species. May submit data for consideration be put in the publication. And then we have a herbicide use committee that reviews the data and decides basically what level of control we need to assign to that practice. These suggestions can be taken anytime from the companies or from our specialists, and then submitted to the committee. And the question sometimes is are all these suggestions recommendations? There's a little bit of difference in what a suggestion means versus a recommendation. Basically, I had to go to the dictionary to kind of make sure I was on on the right page here, but a suggestion is something that's offered for consideration versus a recommendation that's presented as worthy of acceptance. So in other words, a suggestion is not as strong as a recommendation. So some of these practices that are in 1466 have, for example, a low kill rate, and our purpose in this publication is a source of information. So for example, if somebody wanted to use spike herbicide on weesatch, we know that provides a low kill. That information is in that 1466. So if somebody looked at that suggestion, they might decide, well, I don't want a low kill. So that would be a source of information for them. So that's kind of the difference between something being a recommendation would be something that would have a higher value for you than just a suggestion. And NRCS typically does not fund projects that are outside this resource because they have to have data that back up their programs. So they have chosen to use this as a technical guide, and typically the practice will have to be in chemical practice will have to be in this publication before it can be cost shared by NRCS. Okay, so one of the offshoots of the 1466 is the Brush Buster program, and what we did here is we selected specific species that are major problems across the state, for example mesquite, and in 1466 there might be 20 suggestions for mesquite control. And so what we did is we picked the best 2 or 3 suggestions and put them in these folder or trifolds like this that are targeted toward individual plant treatment. And these, to get into a Brush Buster program, a practice has to have better than 70% plant kill. And so each of the practices in the Brush Busters basically comes out of 1466, but it's in a little bit more detail in 1466 for that specific practice. So how do you use this publication? It's about 30 pages long, and it's got a lot of information in it, and it can be a little bit daunting when you first look at it. So we're going to try to show you how we go about using this publication. So in the front of the publication there's a how to use guide, and it goes through 7 different steps here that will take you through how to use the actual publication. And so today in the webinar we're going to kind of look at some of these steps and show you where things go. So one of the first pages in the publication is a list of all the species that we have suggestions for and the pages that they occur on. And this publication has suggestions for weeds and for brush. So there's a section here on weeds, and then there's a suggestion here for brush, or a section for brush. And so if you have a hard copy, this is one way to use the publication. You find the species name, and then you can go to the page where that species is listed and look at the control suggestions. So this page right here is very useful. In fact, it's essential now, because I'll show you what we're doing here. We list the herbicide common name, and then we also list the chemical name, but what you need to really pay more attention to the common name and then the product name. And the reason that we use this chart is that you can see that there are in some of these cases there are a number of products that may be associated with a common chemical name. So we had to develop this chart to allow us to guide you to where you need to be. And then one of the other things that's important on this particular page is the active ingredient or acid equivalent in that of the herbicide in that product. And where this is useful is, for example, if you're comparing products, say right here, if we're looking at dicamba, that's a 4 pound per gallon product. If we're looking at picloram down here, that's a 2 pound per gallon product. So for these products to be equivalent here, they need to have the same pounds of active ingredient. So that's one place that this chart can be very useful to you. But you're also going to have to use this chart when you get into the suggestions, because we can't list all the product names. We can only list the common chemical names, which we'll show you here in a minute. So one of the issues, or one of the things that this publication addresses is control versus suppression. If you look at a herbicide label like Grazon Next, for example, you'll see species that are listed as controlled, and then sometimes they will have an asterisk that says suppression. So basically, if a plant is on the label and it says it's controlled, you don't know what the definition of control is and what level of control you might get. So that's one place that 1466 fills a gap here. So let's look at that level of control, and here in this box you can see that we list, for example, low control is 0 to 35% plant killed, of the plants that are killed. And if we go to moderate, it's 36 to 55, high is 56 to 75, and very high is 76 to 100. So for every practice it's in 1466, there's a control level listed. So you know what level of control to expect if you apply that practice under the right conditions, and if it's done correctly and the timing is correct. So that's a really valuable, it gives you an idea of what expectations to have. Okay, so this is table 5, and it's for weeds. This is where the weeds start, and so we're going to look at what's on this page. For example, we've got a column here for the herbicide common name. So if you were looking for a control of African rue, you'd go to this page, and then you go to this the herbicide common name column, and it lists all the herbicides that we know control this particular plant. But you'd have to refer back to that herbicide common name chart to actually find products that you could use. And again, as I said, the reason we had to do this was because there are so many products. We can't list all the products that are out there. So the common name is where we start, and we go refer back to that table, and you can figure out what products you might want to consider. The other thing that this does is for broadcast applications and for individual plant applications, it gives you this level. It gives you the rates for all these herbicides that you might consider using, and it also gives you the control level. For example, this particular one that I'm pointing to, very high control level for broadcast as well as individual plant treatment. You can typically expect a better or higher level of control for individual plant treatments because we get better coverage. But sometimes, in this case, for this group of plants, we can get very high kill rate, which means 76% and better for both broadcast and individual plant treatments. So here for African rue, for example, if we're going to use imazapyr for broadcast, we'd expect a high level of control, which is 56 to 75% plant kill. And then if we go to individual plant at 0.5% of imazapyr, which is Arsenal and Habitat, those are two products that are available that that have that active ingredient in them, we expect a very high level of control. So that's some of the information that we think is really valuable. It gives you an idea of what to expect with that different practice. And then here we've got information on the spray volume that you need to use, as well as the time to apply. For example, summer to spring, and down here for these annual weeds, spring when the weeds are 4 to 6 inches high and good moisture conditions, and then also any remarks that might be relevant to that plant or group of plants. So this is all information that can help you do the best job you can to achieve the control levels that can be expected. And then the next slide here shows the same kind of information for brush species, the herbicide common name column, and broadcast, individual plant, spray volume, time, and remarks. So that's how the table works. You look at the species that you want to control, and then for example, ash juniper. Then you look at what herbicides are available. You refer back to the table to find the product names, and then you can select practices that are going to give you the kind of control level. And for example, here we don't have any broadcast suggestions for ash juniper. We've only got individual plant suggestions here. And then down here we've got for 2,4-D on Bactrus, we expect a high level of kill broadcast or a high level of kill with individual plant leaf spray. So that's how the table is used, and the value that it provides for you. Okay, so within this publication we have different application options for herbicide use of herbicides. One of the things that we need to remember is what the target is, and then this, for example, is mesquite. The target is actually below ground. This is the bud zone is below ground. This bud zone goes down to the first lateral root, which is down here. All these bumps here are dormant buds, and when we take the top off of a mesquite plant or a weesach plant, we're going to allow those buds to sprout. We're going to remove apical dominance, allow them to sprout, and so just need to remember what the target is. And the target is a lot of times below ground. Not every plant has a resprouting mechanism like mesquite or weesach. Weesach and mesquite have this central bud zone like this. Okay, so one of the methods we've got is the foliar spray. Foliar sprays are best when we've got plants that are less than 6 feet tall, low densities of plants. We've got healthy mature leaves. We can spray during the recommended season, and plants that are multi-stemmed are better suited for foliar spray than they are for stem spray. And when we can reach both sides of the plant or get complete coverage of the plant, and we can leave the plant alone for at least a year. Aerial applications, when we've got larger plants that are over 6 feet tall, or we've got a high density of plants. When we get up around 400 plants per acre, aerial applications are more cost effective than individual plant treatments. We again still need healthy mature leaves. Spray in the recommended season. Works well on aerial, can work on multi-stemmed or single stem. And again, we need to leave them about a year. And then if we move to stem sprays, those work best on plants that have less than three or fewer stems. Stems that are smooth bark. We can, if it's wrong, for example, right now we don't have any leaves, we can't do leaf spray, but we can do stem spray. So if it's not the right time for leaf spray. You need to have access to all sides of the stems. Uh, Areas that are too sensitive for leaf spray could be, we could use this practice in, but we still need to be careful. We'll look at that a little bit later. And again, we need to leave those plants alone for about a year to let the herbicide do its work. Cut stump treatments, stem diameters, really, they're more than 6 inches. The reason I say 6 inches, once they get to that big, the bark gets rough. It's hard for the stem sprays to work very well on those plants. But the cut stump can work on plants that are less than 6 inches. Don't let me mislead you there. It works well when you don't want to leave that plant standing. And if you're okay with some temporary stumps, those stumps are going to be small though, because you want to cut close to the ground level. And if you're willing to put the labor into it, because it is labor intensive. Okay, so one of the things you need to do if you're going to manage brush is this is associated with the 1466. We've got the species listed, but you need to be able to identify the plants. So one of the ways that you can identify one of the sources or resources for plant identification is this rangeplants.tamu.edu. You can go in there and you can search several different ways, by common name, by scientific name, and you can also go in and you can describe the plant by flower color, distribution, and so forth, and try to find it that way. And then once you find a plant you think you've got, you'll have a page that'll pop up and it'll show you the whole plant. It'll show you flowers, different images of the plant. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a second and just see if we have any questions right now. I don't see any.
There's two questions right there. Rancher Mama asked, are you interested in the suggestions guide and what goes in them?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, her next reply is, I'm interested in what is going in. So
okay, still no, I'm not quite following the question. Maybe she can type something in later and I can address it. Okay, the website for the range plant ID, Pete just typed it in there. It's rangeplants.tamu.edu. And I would remind you that this webinar is being recorded, so if you want to look, go back through this, if we've covered things a little too rapidly, you want to go back and look at it, you can look at it for free later on after it's archived. Okay, so maybe we get that question cleared up, and I'll address it later on. Okay, so herbicide use related to 1466, we need to be concerned about stewardship of these herbicides. And so one of the things we need to be aware of is the label. The label is the law, and here on this label we see that Tordon 22K is restricted use pesticide, means you have to have an applicator license, and that it is a herbicide that you need to use with caution, and we'll show you what those caution, danger, and those words mean here in a few minutes here. On this next slide, actually. So warning, if it has a warning, that's the lowest level of signal word. Means substantial but temporary eye damage, harmful to swallow, don't get in your eyes or on clothing, and avoid contact with the skin. And then caution is a little bit more severe. Avoid contact with eyes and skin and clothing. And then danger, that's where you really need to be even more careful, because the herbicide is going to be corrosive. Irreversible eye damage is possible. You want to avoid contact with the skin and not get in your eyes or on your clothing, either one. So there's just different levels of caution that you need to be aware of. Okay, this chart is information that's on labels, and so it tells you, label tells you if it's general use or restricted use. On the label, it's going to tell you if there's any grazing restrictions, and these are all range herbicides, and you can see that basically there are very few grazing restrictions unless you have lactating dairy animals. Then there may be some haying restrictions. And for example, you'll see here with chaparral, there's an 18-month off-farm haying restriction, off-farm sale, as well as with Grazon Next and also with Sendero. So you're not likely to use Sendero for weed control, but Grazon Next you will be, and the reason is one of the active ingredients that's in all three of those is aminopyralid. And then it gives you slaughter intervals. Most of the, well, for example, Cimarron Max, you've got a 30-day interval, but most of these, it's 0 to 3 days. So that information is on the label and can be useful for you when you're using these herbicides. Okay, Grazon Next, it has this chart on the front here that relates to the haying restrictions and compost restrictions, and that's because of that aminopyralid that's in the plant or in the product. And then Sendero has the same chart here, and again because it has that aminopyralid active ingredient in it. And so really for brush control, we don't have to worry too much about the hay because we don't hay areas that have brush on them. Another thing that the label has is reentry intervals, and for agricultural products, which rangeland really doesn't quite qualify for agricultural products, but most of these they're 12 to 48 hours, and then if it's non-agricultural use, you just have to wait till the spray is dried before you can re-enter the area. Okay, so let's move on to some other information that's on the label. Personal protective equipment. This young lady has some blue dye on her legs, and this was actually simulated. There was no herbicide involved in this, but the point of this is that she wasn't wearing the correct personal protective equipment to keep the herbicide from contacting her skin, and the blue dye is proving that. So well, I wanted to take a second and look at this picture and kind of think about what this gentleman is missing some personal protective equipment. And so on the next slide, we're going to ask you what personal protective equipment he's missing. So and the choices are long sleeve shirt, chemical resistant gloves, eye protection, respirator, all of the above, or A and B, or slide down and A, B, and C. So give you all a chance to answer. Okay. All right. Looks like most of you, looks like just about everybody's that's answered is centering around all the above or A, B, and C. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and we'll show you what he is missing. Oops. All right, for range herbicides, there's no respirator requirement. You do need to wear long sleeve shirts, long pants, chemical resistant gloves. So he was missing a long sleeve shirt, chemical resistant gloves, and he was we don't know about shoes and socks, but in that picture you could tell he was not wearing protective eye equipment. So A, B, and C were the things that he was missing in that particular slide. And this gentleman here is wearing, we have to assume that he has long pants, socks, and shoes, but he's wearing long sleeve shirt, he's got chemical resistant gloves, and he has eye protection. And when you're mixing herbicides, that's when you have the most potential for getting some eye damage, because you've got the concentrated herbicide there could splash up in your eye and cause some damage. So you need to be very careful. Okay, so when we're mixing herbicides, this is also information that's on the labels. Basically, you want to add half the water that you're going to put in the spray tank, and then you want to add your herbicides with agitation so you can get them mixed well. And then you continue that agitation and add the remaining water and any additives like surfactants. So the herbicides go in first, and then the surfactants will go in last with the last part of the water. Okay, so one of the things that's important about the herbicides is container disposal. And so you're not allowed to reuse these containers. So it's required that you triple rinse and puncture the container so it cannot be reused. So the suggestion is empty the contents into application equipment. So in other words, if you've got the last of a container that you're pouring into your spray equipment, you pour all that in, and then you let it drain for 10 seconds after the flow begins to drip, and then you fill that container 1/4 full of water, recap it, shake it for 10 seconds, then pour that rinse into the application equipment, and again you want to drain for 10 seconds after the flow begins to drip, and repeat that twice. And after you finish doing that, puncture the container, and then the container can be recycled if you have a recycling available to you, or it can be put in the trash typically. Okay, cleaning out sprayers is important. So you want to rinse and flush after the use of the sprayer. You want to dispose that rinse water in a non-cropped area away from water. You want to rinse it again and then add 32 ounces of household ammonia for every 25 gallons of water, and you want to let it stand for several hours. And then you want to flush that solution through the boom, and then you want to rinse your system twice with water, and then clean the spray nozzles out separately from from the sprayer clean out. And I would not recommend, if a sprayer's been used for a herbicide, I'd recommend that you dedicate that sprayer to a herbicide, not try to then put an insecticide in there and spray your tomatoes, because there could be still be enough residue in there and you could cause some damage. So you really ought to dedicate that sprayer to herbicide use. Okay, one of the other things that we run into is herbicide drift, and the ways that we can control drift are to apply herbicides with the right wind conditions, less than 10 miles an hour. Another way is we can reduce pressure, and that will increase droplet size, and that will increase drift. So high pressure creates small droplets, lower pressure creates smaller droplets, larger droplets, and then those larger droplets are heavier, they're less likely to drift away. Okay, so one of the things that I've had questions sometimes is, can you use a mist blower for applying a herbicide? These mist blowers are used in pecan orchards, and they're really very useful in orchards, in those kind of orchards, because they get very good coverage on the foliage. You're applying nitrogen and zinc on pecans, and they do a really good job. But they create too small of a droplet for herbicide application, and they create a very severe drift potential. And then most labels will say mist blowers are prohibited. So for herbicide use, a mist blower is not a good tool. Okay, so another quiz question here is drift a danger if we're using stem sprays? And so the choices are yes, no, maybe. So we got, okay, got 10 people answering, 11. Okay, we got. Okay, so 40% say yes, 20% say no, and 40% say maybe. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide and it'll show you what the correct answer is. The correct answer is maybe. There are two kinds of drift. One is physical drift. At the time of application, if the wind speed is too high, you can get drift as you're spraying. And you can actually drift anything. You can drift a cannonball. Army artillery does it all the time. You can drift a refrigerator if you have enough force. So there's physical drift. But then there's also the possibility with stem sprays of volatilization after the spray is actually applied. And the reason for that is we're applying stem sprays with diesel as a carrier and Triclopyr ester as the herbicide. The ester is a petroleum product and it is volatile. So if we apply a stem spray under high temperature conditions, that herbicide can actually turn to a vapor and then be drifted away by the wind. So the answer would be maybe. If it's applied under high temperature conditions, then it could happen, even though the physical drift is low. Okay, so we need to pay attention to the label and use the herbicides where they're supposed to be used. And for example, Remedy is labeled for rangeland and grass and pastures, fence rows and so forth, non-irrigated ditch banks. It's not labeled for use around the house. So use of Remedy in the yard would be an off-label use would be illegal. So you can use Remedy on any plant on rangeland. It might not control that plant, but it would be legal to use it. So we need to pay attention to the location of where these herbicides can be used, and all these range and pasture herbicides can be used on range and pastures. With herbicide storage, one of the things that can happen is if the herbicides are stored for a long time, the labels can start to come off. So you need to be careful that the labels stay on the plant, on the containers, so that you've got all the information you need with that label. And it's a good idea to store these chemicals in a place where they're locked up, where children can't get into them, and other unauthorized people can't get in. Okay, this is a no-no. Storing a herbicide in an unlabeled container is not a good idea. If you have one of those random visits, if you have a pesticide applicator license and you get a random visit from Texas Department of Agriculture and they found something like this, you would have some problems. Okay, one of the things that's on the label is maximum use rates. So for example, P plus D has a maximum use rate of 128 ounces per gallon, and so that means that we can treat 1 acre per gallon. And sometimes I get the question, with individual plant treatment, how far can I take this? I mean, how many acres can I treat with this herbicide? So basically what you want to do is have some idea of the area that you're treating, and then so that you can stay within the limits. So for example, Tordon 22K, 64 ounces per acre, so a gallon we could actually treat 2 acres with it. Remedy, 192 ounces per acre, so a gallon would only treat 0.67 acres. So it's important to have some idea what how much area you're treating. And one of the things you can use for that is this free app. It's Explorer for ArcGIS. You can put it on your iPhone, download it for free, and it allows you to calculate area of an area that you're in, acres of an area that you're in. So it's a useful tool. Don't make the mistake I did when I first downloaded this. It says you need to look at the bottom, and it says you want to log in, and at the bottom it says log in without registering. That's what you want to do so that you don't have to worry about registration. But it is, like I said, a free app, and it's very useful. Let's look a little bit at some soil behavior on some of these products. This is Sendero. Sendero has 2 active ingredients, aminopyralid and clopyralid. And typically these range herbicides have, most of them have relatively short half-life. This one has a 35-day half-life. Moderate leaching. Microbes degrade the product. There's also some light degrading of aminopyralid. Now clopyralid, negligible light degradation, but microbes do most of the degradation. So these 2 active ingredients relatively short-lived, even though in the soil. But with Sendero, there is that haying restriction, that hay can't be sold off the property for 18 months, and that's because it can be in the plant for that long. Okay, so Triclopyr ester, the Triclopyr is degraded by light as well as microbes, and has an average half-life of about 30 days, and it has minor soil mobility. So in other words, not going to move very far. The Pasture Guard has a couple of different herbicides in here, active ingredients, the Triclopyr and also fluroxypyr. The fluroxypyr, half-life of 11 to 38 days, very little movement. Both are degraded by microbes. And then picloram, this is the one that we really have to be concerned about because it has the longest average half-life of 90 days, but a range of 20 to 300 days. So it's possible it could hang around for quite a while. And it is also highly leachable, so it is a herbicide that we need to be careful with. Microbial degradation is slow. Obviously that goes into that long half-life there. Then Surmount has fluroxypyr that has relatively short half-life, but then it also has picloram, which has that long half-life. So again, this is one, and you need to be aware of the fact that picloram in the Surmount is going to hang around for a while, and you just need to know that. P+D, again, and Gunslinger have the picloram, which has a long half-life. 2,4-D has a half-life of only 10 days. So you've got one ingredient that's going to be rapidly degraded and another ingredient that's going to hang around for a while. And then the Weedmaster, Rainstar, Outlaw, they have 2,4-D and dicamba. Both of these active ingredients have short half-lives, 10 days and less than 14 days. So rapid degradation with these particular active ingredients. And then Cimarron Max is similar to Weedmaster because it has 2,4-D and dicamba, but then it also has this metsulfuron methyl, and that has a half-life of about 30 days. So you've got 2 very short half-lives here, and then one that's a bit longer. And then Velpar, which is a soil applied herbicide, and one that I would recommend you think twice or more about using, because it is non-selective, has a half-life of about 90 days, moderate in mobility. In other words, it will moderate to high mobility. It will move in the soil. Both Velpar L and L.Pronone Power Pellet have the same active ingredient, so they've got the same side effects in terms of ability or lack of selectivity. In other words, they will have the potential to kill a lot of plants, and one of the dangers is with oaks. In this slide, we've got a juniper that was treated with Velpar, and then we've got damage here in that oak that's next to that juniper. So the suggestion is that you stay at least 3 canopy diameter widths away from a desirable tree. So if this live oak was 50 feet, had a 50-foot diameter, that means you would have to stay at least 150 feet away from that plant to be safe. And if you were upslope from that plant, you'd have to stay even further because the herbicide is mobile in the soil. So this is one herbicide that you want to be careful with. Spike 20P and ADDF have tebuthyron active ingredient, and this degraded by microbes, and it has a half-life of 12 to 15 months. So it stays around quite a while. It doesn't have much mobility, so it stays where you put it basically. But again, this is a herbicide that is non-selective, and here this is a case where spike was applied too close to an oak tree. Okay, so we're gonna see if you have any questions here. Okay, I'm going to start at the bottom, and Pete, you can answer this question for me. Are these slides available for download? If so, where can I find them? You can watch the webinar as many times as you want to for free. Pete, I'm not sure that they can be downloaded from the site though, right?
No, not from the site. And what happens is some of these slides are pretty large, and I've emailed them out to folks before, and they get bounced back because some of the email companies only allow so much of a size of a file to
Right,
be emailed.
but you can. Okay, let's say that you paid today because you needed a CEU. You can come back in and watch this webinar again and again and again for free.
Yes.
So as long as it's posted and archived, you can watch it for free as many times as you want to. Okay. All right. Robert says, is oak particularly sensitive, or are these just convenient examples? No, oak is particularly sensitive. I guess I'd say because, okay, in 1466, if you look in there and you wanted to control oaks, one of the suggestions would be tebuthyron or spike. So, and one of the reasons that we give oak as an example is because of the value that people place on oak trees. But there are other trees that it would have just as much do just as much damage as it does on the oaks. But the oak is an example because of its value. Okay, James, do any of these chemicals have antidotes if misapplied? Okay, I'm not aware of any antidotes if they're misapplied. The ones that would really be the toughest to deal with would be the soil applied. And the foliar applied herbicides, it would depend on what kind of damage there was. But I'm not aware of any antidotes. In fact, there's an instance that I know of where the L.Pronone power pellet was applied too close to an oak, and they tried several things to, after they realized what had happened, they tried several things to try to remedy that, and none of those worked. So I would say basically no antidotes. So the word of caution is to be careful when you apply. So, you know, right wind conditions, make sure you know what's around you, pick the method that's going to be safest for you. And as I said, the ones that are the most devastating typically are the soil applied. Okay. Anybody else have a question? Be glad to try to answer it. Okay. Are the affected oaks dead or just damaged? It depends on the dose. If there's a high enough dose, they're going to be dead. But the thing that you want to do is you just want to avoid the potential for that damage at all. I mean, for example, if you were to apply Velpar to an ash juniper tree, there's a dosage. It's 2 cc's for every 3 foot of height or canopy diameter. So if you have a tree that's greater than 3 feet in diameter or 3 feet high, you need to apply more dosage. So yeah, there would be a dosage factor, but you don't want that damage, because the damage is gonna that tree that I showed there, that's a big tree, and that was a pretty good portion of that tree that was damaged. So that would not be a good situation to be in.
Dr. Lyons, I guess as we wait for more questions, let me briefly say that I'm gonna
Sure, go ahead.
I'm gonna go ahead and kick out a survey. Please answer a survey. All responses are anonymous, and that helps us to use in the future. If by some chance the survey covered up your screen, if you look down your taskbar, you see the little green icon for Adobe Connect. That'll bring you back to the room. And again, our next session is going to be on February the 2nd. Understanding and introduce pasture fertilization. Our speaker is going to be Dr. Vanessa Olson. And again, follow us on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, if you go to www.facebook.com/txrange, we have an educational website that we normally post twice a week, some educational and information. And again, those of you that paid for the CU, I see some of y'all did it. If you haven't typed in your email address, type in your email address, so it'll make it easier for us to send you the and keep track of the certificates. And again, they'll be sent out the first of next month. I think you have another question, Dr. Lyons.
Okay. Is damage always permanent, or is some recovery possible? Recovery is going to be really slow, you know, if it happens. And it depends on how much and what kind of damage. For example, if you got some herbicide volatilization from Remedy and Diesel as you're using a stem spray, you got volatilization there, and you got some burn on the lower leaves of a tree, that tree will probably recover from that. So it kind of depends on how much damage there is. But soil applied, that damage is probably going to be pretty permanent. So again, I can't emphasize enough, just try to avoid having the damage occur to begin with. And for example, there are the more populated area that you're in the state, the more careful you need to be. If you're out west, then if you kill a few small oak trees, that's probably on your place. That's probably no big deal. But when you get further east in the state and properties are smaller, could be a real problem. And we have safe methods. For example, we can do cut stump, we can do stem sprays. Ash juniper can be dug up, can be cut off, doesn't resprout. Okay, another question here. Do you have any experience of risk to live oaks with stump spraying a mesquite with remedy under oak canopy? Okay, the risk of cut stump under the canopy would be if you were doing the cut stump under high temperature conditions. In other words, if it was 85, 90 degrees or better or higher, then that's when you'd see volatilization of the herbicide. And so if you were doing cut stump this time of year, there's very little likelihood that you're going to cause any kind of damage. And again, that would be some temporary damage from volatilization on the lower leaves. But this time of year, I mean, with cooler conditions, I don't think you're going to see anything like that. Back in 2011, I got a call from over in Bracketville where somebody had done in August of 2011, when it was 100 degrees, had done stem spraying on mesquite, and they saw damage away from where they actually did the stem spraying. And that was what was happening was, it was the diesel and the herbicide were volatilizing and moving away from the site that was applied. So the temperature has a lot to do with that herbicide volatilizing. So if you do it under cooler conditions, you'll control that potential for volatilization.
I guess we'll wait for a few more questions, Dr. Lyons. Thank you. I really
Okay.
enjoyed the webinar today. Lots of good information, and audience, thank y'all for attending today. Sure glad that y'all attended our webinars, and again, keep us posted on February the 2nd. We'll have Understanding Introduced Pasture Fertilization, and then again, with this Adobe Connect, you can also download an app, and you can listen to us on your iPhone or your Android or your tablet from just about anywhere. So thank y'all.
Okay, somebody else is typing something here. Let's see. Oh, just thanks. You're